You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney. The people you want to hear from and the things you need to know in Northeast Ohio and beyond. Get in the know, stay in the know. Starting right now.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the Three Things to Know podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Haney, and I am thrilled to have you here with me for the first podcast of 2021. Because that means that 2020 is behind us, which is exactly where we want it, because I don't know about you guys, but for most of 2020, it really felt like we were all doing the most to just exist and get by and do the things that we needed to do. So that's why we are not going to be talking about the thing that a lot of people are talking about today. This is the anti-New Year's resolution podcast. We are not going to be talking about being our best selves because, quite frankly, it's enough to just be our most average selves right now after what we've been through and what we're still going through, by the way, with this COVID-19 pandemic thing. And it's had a big impact on us. So all of that, plus the pressure of New Year's resolutions, is just a little bit much. And it's also important to avoid burnout, which is something a lot of us are feeling after living in this high tense, high stress state for so long. So we're going to talk about the importance of avoiding burnout and how to do that. And to get us in the know on this topic, which I like to think of as counter-programming to all of those slay those resolutions messages you might be hearing, we will be bringing in certified life coach and Mindshift expert Lynn Janovich. She is a Cleveland lady. She's living out in Los Angeles right now, which is where she's practicing. And she's also a master practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic programming and clinical hypnosis. And she also does energy work. So she has a lot to let us know about and fill us in on. Let's bring her in right now. Lynn, thank you so much for being with us here on the Three Things to Know podcast.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Your accomplishments are a mouthful. Before we get going here, I have to ask, can you please explain what it means to be a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming and clinical hypnosis?
Okay. Well, I have been studying NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, for probably about 7-8 years. I became a practitioner and master practitioner in 2017. And what NLP really is, well, it's a lot of things. And when I try and explain it to clients, I like to let people know you don't really have to understand everything or all the jargon involved. But NLP really started off as a study of excellence. The founders, Bandler and Grinder, were really looking at what made certain people successful versus what made certain people not successful. And along the way, they discovered a lot of different tools and techniques and also ways of looking at the world that allow for personal empowerment, if you will. And when I studied NLP, I also studied hypnosis, and they are similar modalities in that they work with our unconscious minds. And when I say unconscious mind, I use that interchangeably with the term subconscious mind. So as most people know, we have our conscious minds and our unconscious minds, but really, all learning and behavior and change really takes place at our unconscious level, right? And when we create habits, it's once we've done it so many times that it's ingrained in our unconscious. So when you use tools with NLP, which is the language of the mind, to actually speak directly to your subconscious, so you can actually create change very rapidly, if you will. Like you're literally like rewiring your neural pathways to create change at the unconscious level, so the change can happen like in an instant. Like sometimes people almost forget how they were before when they do an NLP technique, because that's how deep the transformation is. And hypnosis is similar in that you're speaking directly to the subconscious mind. Does that all make sense?
It does, as much as you said you don't necessarily have to understand all of the jargon and all of the details of it.
Yes.
Basically, it's talking directly to the part of our brains that we can't necessarily tap into on a conscious level. Does that sound right?
Exactly. Perfect. Yes.
And just getting in there and rewiring the things. And how perfect that you're talking about this was born out of a focus of excellence, because quite honestly, it's a lot to try and be excellent all the time. And that's sort of the topic of this podcast today. It's a lot to try and be average all the time in the past year that we've had.
Yeah.
So we are talking about avoiding burnout today. And so that's why this is sort of the anti-New Year's resolution podcast, because it's a lot to just be sometimes.
Yes.
And committing to life changes on
Mm-hmm.
January 1st, which is when a lot of people choose to do it, it's asking a lot of ourselves. Now, how does that pressure to instantly become better versions of ourselves impact us?
Well, I've never been a big fan of New Year's resolutions either, because it's just like, it's this weird arbitrary day, like, oh, start of the new year, then we have to change, and it's like the media keeps like feeding into this whole thing, gym memberships go up, gyms capitalize on it, like nutrition, diet companies, personal trainers, everybody like keeps feeding into this narrative that this is the day we have to change. And then it just becomes like so much pressure, like, oh my God, what am I going to do in 2021? Like it's like the media perpetuates this like arbitrary day that really we should be, trying to better ourselves throughout the year, throughout the months, any day.
And also our social circles, right? When we're talking with our friends about it, it's a common topic of conversation. It's definitely something that you see on social media, people talking about their New Year's resolutions.
Yes. And then you feel like you have to like keep up with the Joneses and you know, try and always be better. And I heard this, I didn't make this up, but this is one of my favorite quotes I've heard. You know how you spell imperfect? I'm perfect.
Mm.
And that's really, I always have to remind myself of that, because especially when I was younger, I always put so much pressure on myself to like be the best at everything I did, always had perfect grades, always on sports, always doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. And then like we're talking about burnout, it just leads to burnout because you put so much pressure on yourself to always be like strive for perfection. One major facet of NLP, one concept is there is no failure, there's only feedback. If you look at any successful person, they've just failed more than you. They had to fail a bunch of times to get where they are. It's like if something doesn't work, then you learn from it. You either succeed or you learn. So, fear of failure, I think, is a big thing, with people. And it's really just understanding that, okay, if something didn't work, let's try something else, and let's not beat ourselves up over it.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, when we're dealing with other stressful factors, even as we mentioned a bit earlier, just being average
Mm-hmm.
on a consistent basis
Yeah.
can lead us to feel that burnout. We've been asking a lot of ourselves basically all year long throughout 2020. Now, thankfully, we are in 2021 and that is behind us. But talk to me about the unique ways 2020 has sort of forced us to be more on than we have in years past.
Well, I mean, first off, 2020, so many people, aside from people losing relatives to the illness, people losing their jobs, people under stress, losing their homes, like our sense of security and comfort has been taken away from many of us, right? So then it causes us to like question ourselves, what should we be doing with our life? Like it just raises so many questions, and we realize we take for granted all the things that we had before, and we feel like we need to like redefine ourselves in this year. But then also we have to like also be kind to ourselves, because a lot of this year has been traumatic in some ways for many of us, and we have to really, you know, be easy with ourselves. Like we've all been affected by this in some way or another, and we have to be forgiving of that. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book The Four Agreements. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz, and in one part he talks about, humans are the only species that continually beat ourselves up for something over and over and over. And I feel like that happened a lot this year with our losing our security, our just so many things, like the election, the politics, it just went on and on and on.
It's been a lot. It has
Yes.
certainly been a lot. And that is a great book. I have read it multiple times. I only
Yes.
have a couple of hardcover books because I like to get a hardcover book and then I'll give it away after I'm done with it. That's a keeper, though. That one I have.
Yes, it's one of my favorite books.
It is a great one. And as you said, 2020 has been a lot. So if you sort of add the pressure of all the trauma that we've been experiencing, and that's simply putting it, yes, we have been experiencing a lot of trauma this year, and it takes time to process that trauma. We might not even realize how exactly we've been impacted about this for a long time to come. So that's a lot. Then you talk about the pressure of New Year's Day resolutions. It becomes a lot. So what we're talking about here today is avoiding burnout. Now, why is it important to avoid burnout?
Well, when we put so much pressure on ourselves and try to do too many things at once, then obviously it does lead to burnout. But then when we get burnt out, it's like, it's just this feeling of overwhelm. Like you feel like you have so much to do that you don't even know where to start. So you sometimes just don't do anything. So then you look back and you feel like, oh my God, I was lazy. And then you start talking bad about yourself sometimes, criticizing yourself. And then it just creates a cycle like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? What am I doing? I'm going to do all this thing and try and be better all at once. And then again, overwhelmed, then another cycle like, oh my God, what's wrong? It just like creates a cycle, At least that's how I feel about it.
Negative self-talk can be so pervasive, and then when you get in that loop, it is difficult to sort of get yourself out of it. That is something that I try to be mindful about with myself. So that's something that I will say I have personally experienced. If I criticize myself, and even not to take it too seriously, but even if I make a silly mistake and I say something to myself like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, that was stupid, I do try and stop myself, because I'm not stupid, I'm just a human.
Yeah.
We're all just being humans here.
I know.
We need to give ourselves a little bit of grace. So, being the life coach, being the Mindshift expert, can you tell us what are some of the best ways to avoid burnout?
When I use NLP and hypnosis with people, if there's really a root cause, like a root negative self-talk that you believe, sometimes we do have to shift that belief. So I will use those tools to help shift the beliefs. But if you don't have those tools, one way to do it is, if you notice a belief coming up for you, journal about it, write it down, and then start creating like an affirmation or something to say to yourself that's the opposite, and just like keep saying that to yourself. That's like a simple way you can start shifting beliefs. But really, to avoid burnout, I feel like it's really about creating the daily habits that'll help prevent burnout. So like meditating is very important, and I know meditating is challenging. It's challenging for me too, because my brain is always going, as most of us, I find. But just even like allowing yourself to sit quietly. And meditation, again, that's another thing to give ourselves grace about, right? Because it takes practice. But just even allowing yourself to be in a quiet space, connecting with nature, or just doing something like some sort of self-care, like if it's like you want to put on a fun song and dance around, or just read a book, or just whatever you need to do to just like take some time. That's really important. It needs to be literally scheduled in, or you won't do it. I feel like it's really about scheduling in that self-care, creating a daily routine, but also not trying to change your routine all at once. Like when I work with clients, I want to gradually add things to them, to their daily routine, right? And as far as work, like I find, if I don't set a timer, I can get totally lost in the work and just like, and then I get too stressed out. So it's like you literally can set a timer for like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and then take a break, do something else, and just set action steps that are really just like little action steps that are more sustainable over time than trying to do too much in a short amount of time. It's really about creating that in your daily routine to help you prevent burnout. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I do think it's a little bit ironic, and I have to laugh about the fact that the way to prevent burnout is to schedule more things.
Well, I mean,
I know what you're saying.
Yes.
No, I absolutely know what you're saying. I just think that it's just funny to think about it that way. We need to schedule time to meditate. We do, and it is really about just prioritizing our day differently.
But I like if scheduling, if you say schedule it and it sounds like that stresses you out, you can just like reframe it, word in a way that sounds better. Like, oh, I'm just allowing myself to meditate in the morning. It's about like reframing the way you think about scheduling, right? You don't need to think, oh my God, this schedule has to follow. Be like, I allow myself 30 minutes in the morning to recharge, meditate, journal, whatever it is you have to do. Just reframe it in a way that doesn't sound like it's going to be stressful. It's all about the perspective you have on it.
So making time for yourself, and also maintaining that positive perspective about the things that you are prioritizing and that do make sense for you, and also taking stock of those things and just making them a priority and making time for them.
I mean, that's what I really try and help my clients with, I mean, after I usually work with people for a period of 3 months, and like, we'll start once after a couple weeks, this one habit, like a gratitude journaling. That's one thing I love to have people do to get you in a good mind state, right? So once that becomes easy, then we'll gradually throw something else in. It's just, again, no overwhelm, no burnout, like just slowly, it's about making gradual changes. There's another really great book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. I am not sponsored by him. I don't get paid to talk about this book, but it is an amazing book, and it really talks about the little things you do daily that add up to the big things. And sometimes it's the little mundane things that are easy to do, but also easy not to do. But if you just do the little things, it gradually like builds momentum and snowballs into a big thing, instead of trying to jump from like when people set New Year's resolutions, you try and jump from where you are now to this crazy different place. Like, you need to have stepping stones in between, right?
That makes sense. I can definitely resonate with that. Anytime you try to go from 0 to 100, that can absolutely be a difficult thing. So then my follow-up question to that would be, if someone is experiencing burnout and they are feeling those feelings of stress when they're thinking about just being burnt out, the fact that they're acknowledging that they're burnt out is stressing them out, do you have a tip for that person?
Take a break. I mean, really, you got to take a break. Take a breath, take a break, take a weekend, change your environment, and just really think about the bigger picture of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Like, think of your bigger picture goal for yourself. Like, where do I want to be in 10 years? How is what I'm doing serving me? And maybe you're going to find out that what you're doing now that you feel so stressed out about really isn't going to be that important in the long run. Or maybe you should be doing something. Like, you want to think about any goal you set or anything you're trying to accomplish, like, how is that in alignment with my values? Like, you really want to know take a moment and figure out what's really most important to you. Sometimes we're burned out because we're moving in a direction that's not in alignment with what's really important to us. It's really about getting in alignment, taking the time to find out what's most important, like what's most important in our career, what's most important in our family, like, and how is this goal going to get me to my bigger picture of where I want my life to go in the next 5, 10, 15 years. It's really about being in alignment. So sometimes that's the big problem too, is we're going, but it's really not something that aligns with our core, what's really important to us.
And that can be very exhausting.
Yeah, I mean,
lots of levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned that you do clinical hypnosis. Is that something that can help people with avoiding burnout?
Well, I think hypnosis I use a lot when I'm helping people like shift beliefs about themselves, like worthiness, or like, I've helped people with shifts about their body image and their self-love. You can help people. I've helped people with smoking habits, those types of things. It's really about shifting your subconscious. So if there's something like a belief you need to change, or an affirmation you want to install, I think that's where hypnosis is most helpful. I really think for the daily routine, it's more like the meditating, the grounding, the feeling in alignment with your values, if that makes sense. So hypnosis can definitely help with that, but I feel like it's more the daily routines and the daily like reframes, if you will.
Gotcha.
And if you're not, it's okay to not be okay all the time.
I think that's gold right there. It's okay to just acknowledge that we're burnt out and not feel bad about being burnt out and not feeling like doing anything. Maybe that's
okay.
The way.
It's
the way
okay
to get through the burnout.
It's okay to, like, if you have to be on your bathroom floor crying, just do it. Let it out. Like, that's just releasing it. Just let it go. And then just tomorrow's another day. Next day is another day. Just like every day is a new day. And in 4 agreements, we always do your best. I mean, and your best isn't always the same every day.
That's sage advice right there. That's perfect.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating and very enlightening, Lynn. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Can you let people know where they can connect with you if they're interested in more about your work?
Yeah. So to be honest, most of my work has come from word of mouth, and I do talk about my different promotions and things like that on my personal Facebook page. So my Facebook is just, facebook.com/Lynn.Janovich. It's LYNN.JANOVICH. And I also have a Facebook business page, which is facebook.com/Lynn Janovich Transform. So that's really where, anybody can get get in contact with me.
All right. Thank you so much for making time with us today, Lynn. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Burnout is real, y'all. That was very enlightening. Lots to think about there from Lynn Janovich. Thank you very much to her for coming on. Now, it's time for your weekly inside scoop on what you need to know in NEO. And for this particular episode, I have the perfect man for the job. You've been reading his stories for years. You see him on your TV, and you listened to him last week in our 2020 year in review right here on the 3 Things to Know podcast. I am talking about our investigative reporter, Mark Naymik. I'm going to bring him in right now. Mark, thanks for being here on the podcast 2 weeks in a row. How did we get so lucky?
Hey, Stephanie, thank you for having me. I know my wife will probably dispute the perfect man description, but I'm going to take it. So I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here, especially talking about 2021.
We are thrilled to have you. And you and I had talked about something very cool that you're doing. You know, this is the anti-New Year's resolution podcast for 3 Things to Know, because the year leading up to 2021 has been a lot, and you had a pretty cool way of kind of getting around that burnout thing, or at least focusing on something else, something better. So tell me about how you're doing that with your daughters.
Yes, this is not related to 3 News or Channel 3, but I have been promoting in my household this idea of give me 3 things that you're looking forward to doing in 3 months. I kind of set 3 months as one way to get past some of the tough months here, weather-wise, but also hopefully we're going to be seeing the impact of the vaccine and more disciplined and accepting of mask wearing and other things, and hopefully past what they expect to be a 3rd surge. So I've really tried to say, what is it? It could be indoor, outdoor. Maybe we can't go see BTS concert in Chicago, as my daughter has been waiting for. Not yet, but what are those 3 things? And so I'm trying to apply that, to myself as well, obviously, personally, professionally. What are those 3 things I look forward to in 3 months? And it is something that I've kind of been changing a little bit. I moved the goalposts, but I'm trying to stick with it, because I'm not a big self-help guy or come up with resolutions, because I'm constantly always chasing things. I don't set a marker at the beginning of the year, but I think in a pandemic and COVID world, I think 3 in 3 months is not a bad way to look.
It's a great way to think about it. I love the idea. So for our need to know in NEO, that tip is great in and of itself, but also, can you let us in on some of the things that are on your 3 in 3 list?
Yeah, I'll start with the big one first, and it's something I wanted to do this past summer, but the pandemic really made it tough, and that is to visit a gem that's hidden here in Northeast Ohio, and it's Sandusky, and it has nothing to do with the amusement park. The city of Sandusky itself has been around, of course, long before Cedar Point. It was really a big shipping town, and it's really gone through a rebirth since the 2008 recession. $100 million worth of investment, and just the idea to be able to walk on the waterfront. They put in a bike path right on the waterfront, an amphitheater. There are, kind of hipster, cool guys that have come in from other places that were originally from Sandusky, but have moved back and opened up shops, whether it's the paddle boarding or bike rentals, boutique hotels, a lot of restaurants. Even if some of those remain closed, the idea to be able to walk by one of the greatest resources that we have in really an old town that's really in a rebirth. So I'm putting the city of Sandusky. I'm not getting paid for this, of course. It's not an endorsement. But I did do a story last summer that really opened my eyes to how much has changed there. I mean, really dramatic, almost to the point that I wish I was smart enough to have invested earlier. And then I recently ran into a neighbor whose brother just bought a condo in Sandusky, in an old warehouse on the waterfront. So there's just so much there. So that's number one. I'm looking forward to that. Even if it's early in 3 months, I'll do it at the end of the 3 months, but it'll still be early in the season to get out there with the family to check it out, whether it's on foot or on bike. So that's definitely on my list. The other thing I really look forward to doing, and it's something I do like being alone a lot. maybe because in our jobs we're around people all the time and dealing with them, but is to
True.
sit, in the modern art section of the Cleveland Museum of Art on
Mm.
a day that's not busy, because that ability to sit on a bench alone, it's always really quiet, and to reflect into that art, that's always been something I've done when I just need to get away into a space and imagine wherever I am, whether it's water lilies that I'm looking at, or some more modern art that's there that's pretty dramatic. So that's number two. And then number three, of course, is anything outdoors. And I know you get out there and hike, but there are some closed roads behind Brandywine Falls,
Mm.
over in Boston Heights area. That's part of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and there was an old access road. You can still walk it, and it's actually pretty treacherous because the pavement is uneven and broken. But it'll take you down, and you'll come into the Boston Mills Station, which has recently been renovated by the park. And then there's a road there, and some folks will actually do it on their mountain bikes. I've seen people do it on a road bike, but that's a really cool space. Get you a little bit off the beaten path, but that gives me an indoor and outdoor, and then a little bit of a trip to Sandusky. So those would be my 3 and 3 months, I hope.
Well, that sounds like the perfect trifecta to really be a little bit of a remedy for any burnout that we might be feeling coming out of the tail end of 2020. I have to ask, Mark, of course, you were going to give us some very insider information for the Need to Know in NEO. How'd you find out about those closed roads?
Part of it is I've just explored and networked through other bikers and hikers. And I went on a bike ride with a friend who I'd never ridden before with. And I said, all right, well, just take me on one of your courses. I thought he was nuts. I said, we started riding past the falls. I'm like, I know I've hiked down here. Are we really going to make it on the bike? And we did. And as we got past that, I got further than I've ever hiked. And then I just found it was great. I've taken others there since. So it really was just what you always get. It's a network. The more people you meet off your inner circle, the more that you can learn about your town. And I thought I knew a lot about the city, and often, held myself out as somebody that knew a lot. But there you go, Sandusky, and this bike path have all come to me new in the last year.
Well, that's what it's all about. You are certainly an insider. You know more about the city probably than anybody that I know. But we're always learning new things, and that's what this is about. That's why we come here to the 3 Things to Know podcast. So thank you for those, Mark. Those are incredible. Now, before I let you go here, we have to let people know where they can follow you. So where can people connect with you on social media?
All right, I appreciate that. I'm always at Mark Naymik on Twitter and on Facebook as well. And I do have marknaymik.com, which is a website that I have built during COVID times, really to just highlight both the work at Channel 3, but it has a catalog and a collection of stories that I've done, organized by columns, investigative pieces, some of the crazy features that I've written over the years, going all the way back to my days in alternative newspapers. I also have on that site some of my photography that I'm trying to take and keep current with places in and around Cleveland, including one of my summer 3-on-3s, which was kind of a walk through some of the industrial areas down there and taking some photos in and around the bridges, where I was inspired by a Cleveland photographer named Mike Levy. Used to be at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, does some phenomenal black and white work of places, and finds the angles and the images. And he is a true Clevelander. So you can find that at marknaymik.com as well. So thanks for asking and letting me talk about that stuff.
Sure. I think we've just gotten 75 need to know in NEO things from you. I can't wait to pour over your website. I am absolutely going to be looking at those photographs. That sounds incredible. All right, Mark, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming back on.
Thanks, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year to you too, Mark. Yeah, Mark was clearly being modest because he knows more about Cleveland than anyone that I know, which is apparent by the fact that he just rattled off all of those incredible hidden secrets about the Northeast Ohio area that we need to know here in NEO. And that brings us to a good follow for this week, and we are focusing on Instagram today. The account is The Greg Murray, and this is the perfect account to follow if you're feeling a little bit burnt out and you just want to sort of do some mindless scrolling and look at some beautiful photos of pets. And they are very cool images. These are kind of like pop art style images with bright backgrounds and funky props and interesting perspectives and angles, and it's just absolutely beautiful work. And by the way, you don't need to take my word for it that he's a good follow on Instagram, because you all voted for him. The Greg Murray was one of the top 5 voted for by Cleveland Scene readers to be a good follow on Instagram in Scene's Best of 2020 poll. So there you go. Your neighbors and friends are also telling you that The Greg Murray is a good follow. He's also, by the way, been featured on The Today Show, on HuffPost, on People magazine, and in Elle magazine. So clearly good stuff. Very cool looking photos of pets. And it is just magic seeing it pop up in your feed. So I highly recommend it. And that brings us to the end of the first 3 Things to Know podcast for 2021. Thanks for being along for this ride. Hopefully you learned something about burnout and the importance of taking care of yourself and how you can sort of get out of that vibe if you're feeling that vibe. I will see you back here next week. And in the meantime, I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast if you're not doing it already. Give it a share and a rating and a review, because that really helps us connect with more people here in Northeast Ohio. That's it for this one. I will see you back here next week. I'm Stephanie Haney.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.